Welcome to the largest study on climbing falls. For the last 2 years, we have measured and analyzed hundreds of falls. Big, small, with heavy and light climbers and a lot of friction.
1, 2, 3.
Man, I cannot give you a soft catch this way.
Initially, I had two main questions I wanted to answer in this study. The first one is, how does the amount of slack affect the fall? If the belayer gives more rope, obviously the climber will fall more, and if he would fall straight down, the fall would be harder, because the fall is bigger. However, in climbing, often we have a little pendulum, a little swing into the wall. So then the question is, does falling more reduce the pendulum and reduce how hard the climber is gonna hit the wall? And the second part of this study was aimed to answer the question, which belaying method is the best? Here we compared jumping up versus stepping forward. And as a bonus, does that change if the belayer is heavier? And as an extra bonus, we also compared against the tube-style soft catches, where you let the rope slide through the device. And while my curiosity started with these two questions, I actually discovered way more, including some peculiar cases how lightweight belayer can cause harder catch than a heavier belayer. So let's begin. Now, the problem with making such studies is a sheer number of variables. Every fall is different. We have different weights of the climber and the belayer, the position of the climber before the fall height and the friction, and also the rope might get stiffer over multiple falls. And of course, the big one is how the belayer will handle the catch. So I thought, okay, challenge accepted. I'm gonna put a force measuring device on the climber and do as many different falls as needed to see the patterns. And off we went, measuring and measuring and measuring hundreds of falls, and I was building a huge database of results. And after a lot of work, I understood something, and oh shit moment happened. What we were actually measuring was the peak force to the climber's harness, which happens around this moment of the fall. However, this moment is not a problem for the climber. What is the problem, however, is how hard the climber will hit the wall. I always felt sorry for these lightweight climbers who are slammed into the walls and end up with broken or sprained ankles. So let's fix that. Now, while the peak forces should have a correlation with how hard the climber will hit the wall, I needed to find a way to prove it. And here I was, mounting a camera to the wall, with the hope to calculate the speed at which the climber would hit the wall based on slow motion footage. And here was a tricky part. Due to perspective distortion, objects that are further away look smaller. And in addition to that, every camera lens introduced extra distortion. So I really needed to mount the camera as perpendicular to the climber's falling plane as possible. And it's not like I can just float the camera anywhere in space I want. But after a bit of route searching and then a lot of object tracking, combined with a lot of custom code I wrote, I got these beautiful velocity and acceleration graphs. And now we can do hundreds of more falls and make sense of them. Alright, let's begin with the question, how does different amount of slack affect the fall? What we did was a series of incremental falls where the belayer does nothing, basically causing a hard catch. The first fall was with zero slack, and even though it's a small fall, I was swung towards the wall really hard. For the second fall, we used about half of arm of slack. And despite the fall being a little bit bigger this time, the peak horizontal velocity was lower. Now, of course, on such overhanging routes, the more the climber falls, the further the wall gets. And that's why I was measuring horizontal speed. And the peak of that speed usually happens at the bottom of the pendulum, and it's a very good indicator of what would happen if the wall would not be overhanging. Alright, let's try with even bigger falls. Charlie was clearly enjoying this.
Yeah.
Subscribe!
And the result was interesting. The horizontal speed was nearly identical to the previous fall, however the peak acceleration was bigger, which means that the climber would reach the peak speed faster. So based on this, it seems that having a little bit of slack was better than no slack, but having even more was questionable. However, despite us trying to mimic hard catches, these falls weren't that hard. The faults were relatively small and the belayer was still pulled up a lot. And the reason I'm saying this is that in the past I have done similar tests under this bridge where I have discovered that once the fall is hard enough, it exceeds the rope's ability to absorb the impact and the climber experiences a bounce back effect, and this causes harder falls for the climber. However, when we tried the same with soft catches, there was no bounce back and the swing was lower. So back to real rock. Let's leave the hard catches for the reference and see how the soft catches will compare. Starting with zero slack, we can see that the trajectory of the fall is more gradual and that the horizontal speed and acceleration was lower, significantly lower. Next fall was with half arm of slack, and despite the climber falling more, horizontal speed was actually almost identical. So let's try bigger.
Okay, 1. Oh, 2.
Uh-oh.
Okay, let's go. Ooh, that was soft. Don't you think?
I was too scared to think.
So despite nearly pulling my belayer into the first bolt and colliding with him, the horizontal speed again was nearly identical. So at least in this test case scenario, falling more combined with soft catch had no benefits. But as they say, one test is no test. And that's why I was rigging another one in the spot where we will be able to do even bigger falls.
Falling. Hardish.
So we started with zero amount of slack and Charlie giving the softest catch he can. However, the fall was described as hardish.
Ready?
Yeah.
1, 2, 3. Falling. Softer.
And this time, adding a little bit of slack felt softer for the climber and also did reduce the horizontal speed by a little bit. So let's see what happens with even bigger falls.
You good?
Whenever you want.
1, 2, 3. Falling.
Can I take a big fall?
Very soft.
Very soft.
And if we look into the graphs, the horizontal speed was even lower this time. So we went even bigger to 1.5 meters of slack, which is quite a lot.
1, 2, 3. Falling. Woo! That was soft, but there was this kind of tuk.
Yeah.
Yeah, I noticed it myself.
So this time the climber felt more jerk on the initial impact of the rope. However, the horizontal speed was further reduced. And looking into all of these faults, we can clearly see correlation how increasing the amount of slack decreases the horizontal speed into the wall. And since that was contradicting with our previous findings, we had to do more falls. And in this scenario, falling more was also better. You can even see the visual difference. And here is one more example. This time the climber was falling from lower position and we had less friction. Once again, falling more had softer impact with the wall. So a summary of this segment is that the swing or the pendulum into the wall can be reduced by extra slack. However, if you exceed the rope's ability to absorb the impact, the rope will bounce the climber back into the wall, and then things might be even worse. And obviously falling more gets you closer to exceeding that limit, But more importantly, hard catch can get you there very quickly. So, for example, here is one of the most common mistakes where the belayer simply throws a ton of slack, but no effort in making a soft catch.
Okay.
And here is another one. First, a soft catch. And now a hard one.
Yeah, that.
We had the same amount of slack, but the difference was massive. You can clearly see the bounce back effect, how the climber is being pulled back up.
What was your impressions? One
Soft.
elbow versus 2 elbows versus 3 elbows. No elbows.
Between 1 elbow and 2, you'll have to measure that, más o menos, more or less what it's going to be. But I think that's the sweet spot.
How
You
was no slack at all?
Difficult to give the soft catch. It's difficult to give the soft catch.
Yeah, with no slack, it's really hard to hit the timing perfectly.
Yeah.
So what we all noticed is that with zero slack, it's really hard to give a soft catch because you don't have enough time to go down and jump up. Maybe with the exception if the fall is really big, then the climber is falling for quite a while and then you have time. But on very, very small falls, you would have to have some cat reflexes and go like super fast. But in general, the most comfortable was between half to full arm of slack, and that caused the softest catches for the climbers. And more than that is very, very rarely beneficial, and simply asking for some collisions or dragging the belayer into the first bolt, or simply a bunch of extra pull-ups for the climber after the fall.
And the bigger ones, like 3 elbows?
Like I say, between 1 and 2 elbows is the sweet spot. Like 1 and 2 is more or less the same for me personally. 3 is also softer, Anna says, but just a little bit harder to judge again. But it's harder to judge when to jump.
Because the climber is falling faster already.
Exactly, exactly.
Now I can see how lightweight belayers are probably already typing, no slack for me, I fly up anyway. So we actually did testing on that and we got some interesting results. But before that, I just wanted to quickly say thank you for all my friends and supporters who helped in creating all of this study. It's been the biggest project I've ever tried, both in terms of time and energy and money. So it would definitely not be possible without all of you. So huge thank you. And now back to lightweight belayers. So we started with zero slack.
Whoa, that looked harder.
Yeah.
Visually.
And we can already see something interesting. Once the rope gets tight, the speed of the climber starts to drop. However, as soon as the belayer is pulled off the ground, the speed of the climber starts to increase again. The climber experiences a double fall effect. Okay, let's increase the amount of slack. We still get this double fall effect, but the horizontal speed is reduced. So let's go bigger. And here we have the same pattern, a double fall, but the horizontal speed is even further reduced. So let's try even bigger with crazy 1.5 arms of slack.
Ready?
Yeah.
3, 2, 1.
Soft catch, Anna.
And here the double fall effect is very visible. But same as in previous experiments, we see a strong correlation that the bigger the fall, the slower the horizontal speed for the climber, so the softer impact with the wall. And while that wasn't a surprise, what was, however, a surprise is when we swapped her and me. Naturally, I was expecting that the heavier belayer should cause a harder catch for the climber. But if we compare Anna's no slack versus mine, you can see that my catch was significantly softer. And here is Anna's half arm of slack compared to mine. And same results. My catch was softer again. And to be fair, we were asking her to give a soft catch.
1, 2.
And give a soft catch.
You ready?
Yeah.
Soft catch, Anna.
3, 2, 1.
And finally, Anna's full arm of slack versus mine. And to my surprise, I was giving softer catches for the climber than the lighter belayer. However, I think this has more to do with the fact that lighter belayers usually fly up anyway, so they don't have enough practice to give soft catches. But let me give you another example. So this experiment was slightly different.
118.
Here, me and Charlie did a bunch of soft catches, but this time we measured the forces to the climber. This was the average line of Charlie's catches, this was mine, and this was the average of averages. And we also did some hard catches for the reference.
Falling. That was much harder.
All right, and now let's compare this to a light belayer.
Falling. No.
Ah.
No.
And the first catch was really bad. In fact, as hard as our hard catches.
You jumped way too soon. You've got to wait till she sucks you.
Okay.
You're down here, and when you can feel her sucking you, you push up with her.
Okay.
Look at her. Once she starts falling, you go down, up.
Vale. I am getting scared. Más steady, más steady.
Come on.
1, 2, 3. Falling. No.
Now, the second catch was much better, but still not what we were expecting. So we did some practicing.
Falling. Oh, that was super soft. Falling.
And then this happened.
Nice.
That was 121.
121. Yeah.
So as you can see, experience plays a bigger role than being lighter, and although lighter belayers very rarely cause hard catches for climbers, however, with enough friction, light belayer becomes heavy. And actually recently I saw one really nasty fall where a belayer was a light girl, a climber was a relatively light girl, a lot of friction and a huge slam into the wall. And then a poor girl had to get assistance to get back to the car. And I'm curious, did you ever got unexpectedly hard catch from a light belayer? Write down in the comments, I want to see how often that happens. All right, so we have seen how both slack and soft catch has a big effect on the fall, but there is something even more important. Here is a hard catch with no slack. And here is a soft catch with a little bit of slack. So we can see the best and the worst case scenarios. But now check what happens when the climber falls from slightly different position. I simply changed my legs, but I was not pushing away from the wall.
I anticipated a bit too much there.
That's why you wear a helmet.
Yeah. That would have been what was it? A trip straight to the yard.
Trip straight to the yard.
That would be gold!
But if we look into the graphs, we can see that this new fall had harder fall than the hard catch before, despite Charlie trying to give it a soft catch with his head. So as you can see, how the climber falls can be more important than the amount of slack or a soft catch. And here, sometimes you can see beginners pushing away from the wall during the fall, and combine that with another inexperienced belayer and a hard catch, and that's a good recipe for sprained ankles. So do not push. It's very rarely beneficial to push away unless you're clearing some kind of slab, but otherwise, do not push. Now, in the second part of this study, I wanted to figure out which belaying method is the best. So we compared jumping up versus stepping forward. And also, does that change if the belayer is heavier or there is a lot of friction in the system? But since all of this is already a slightly different topic, I'm gonna split all of this in part 2 of this video. But before you go, I wanted to share something with you that you might find beneficial. In order to create these nice charts that you have seen in this video, I needed to understand how to take my messy experimental data and perform a polynomial fitting. This allows to obtain a smooth graph that don't lose important points. And chances are, if you're like me, math and physics might not be our main career path, and our abilities to understand such topics either never existed or are already fading away since the last time we sat in calculus or physics class. And that's why I've been really enjoying Brilliant.org. It's the best way to learn math, data science, and computer science interactively. In general, I see two problems of learning advanced topics. The first one is not having enough building blocks that lead into these more advanced subjects. That's why I really love their new feature of learning paths, where the platform progressively guides you from the very basics to more and more complicated and interesting topics. Personally, I'm nearly done with foundational math, and now I feel more than ready to dive into data science and physics. That's my two recent interests. And the second reason which stops us from taking on such learnings is that it might feel like, oh, it might take forever to understand these topics. However, just 15 to 20 minutes a day equals to 100 hours a year. And in 100 hours, you can learn a lot of things and greatly expand your curiosity on life. So if you're curious, you can try Brilliant.org completely for free for 30 days by visiting brilliant.org/hardiseasy or by clicking the link in the description. And the first 200 of you can also get 20% off their premium annual subscriptions. So thank you, Brilliant.org team, for making curious humans and supporting my mega researches. And thank you, curious human, for watching my mega researches. See you in the next one.